but let me introduce you. He's a very busy man. He is incredibly busy and highly innovative.
Just do a high level.
Just high level stuff. Okay, so I don't know what are the high level things. There are lots of exciting stuff here. But he's the CEO of, the founder and CEO of Blank Canvas International, and you will explain to us what that is. Sure. He's also the founder of Thought Leaders Academy. He's the founder and chairman of the Sustainability Summit, which is shortly, no?
Yeah, it's happening on the 29th of June.
June, okay. Yeah. Founder and chairman of African Sustainable Development Association. He's also the co-founder of the Resilience Business Group and co-founder at the implementation faculty at the Da Vinci Institute. So he's also a faculty member at Da Vinci. I want to see if there's anything. Okay, I think this is important. He seems to be a bit of a disruptor, and I like that Alan has spoken about disruptive technologies because it fits in perfectly with what you want to talk about now, because it is about how do we use technology. No? So he's a disruptive cross-functional facilitator, is that correct? He's a resilient business performance strategy, co-creation and operationalization. I don't know, that's a long one. But I think the point is, people, I don't need to go on and on and on. The CV is certainly available. I think it is on our website, if I'm not mistaken. So with those few words, and those are very inadequate words, and I'll do excuse me, but you are most welcome, and thank you very much for coming to talk to us.
So thank you very much. So guys, certainly thank you for allowing me the opportunity. For me, whenever I'm engaging with team members, it's always a learning experience. And I think that really links very well to the theme of Curiosita, saying, we're always curious to learn. So I'm looking forward to certainly learning much more from you today than I would hope that you would be learning from me, because then I've certainly achieved my objective. So I've handed something out which I believe will structure our discussion a little bit today. And again, to the words that Ronel has made, with us normally being quite disruptive, applying innovation, design and systems thinking, the essence of being disruptive is just to bring some new thinking to the table. Listening to what Alan is doing, that's certainly a disruptive model, and it's applying disruptive technology certainly to the African and South African market, to where we need it most. So hats off, Alan. Thanks for a very stimulating discussion, and I look forward to certainly doing some more stuff with you. So considering Da Vinci and the relationship that we have, I represent the implementation faculty. So we're normally the guys that need to roll up our sleeves and get the job done. And we also need to measure whether there's an impact around the learning. So if we've identified a work-based challenge, is that work-based challenge aligned? And if we're solving that work-based challenge, are we solving it, and is the impact for everybody around? So reflecting a little bit with me today, reflecting on Da Vinci, and leading into the topic of resilient business performance strategy, and obviously how do you implement a resilient business performance strategy. We're basically saying as Da Vinci, the purpose is to cultivate managerial leaders. So this is saying, how do we create world-class managers and also leaders, and how do we put the skill sets together? This is quite unconventional thinking for a business school and certainly for a university. So the dream of Da Vinci is to contribute to the development of a sustainable society. So I believe that if we're all here, we are aligned to that dream, and we're certainly living that dream as South Africans. But it's a big dream if we're realistic about it. There's also some key principles of Da Vinci, of seeking the truth, taking responsibility, sharpening awareness, engaging the shadow. Cultivating balance is on here twice for a good reason, because I think we're all struggling with maintaining a healthy balance of work, life, and certainly what goes with it. And then embracing holism, which is all around systemic thinking, and we're going to be double-clicking on systems thinking in a minute. So the brand promise of Da Vinci, as a good case study here, is to co-create reality. So if we're all part of Da Vinci in some way or the other, either as students or as faculty or as just partners, how are we co-creating the reality in South Africa today? Because that's really the question. How are we co-creating the reality for Africa, and how are we co-creating the global reality? So I'm going to ask you to just reflect on your own reality for a minute, your family life, your business that you're involved in your value chain that you are involved in. We're going to talk a lot about resilient value chains and resilient value chain performance, because we're certainly not operating in isolation. We're part of a bigger picture, we're part of a value chain, and we all need to offer sustainable value. So if we think about the reality in South Africa, what comes to mind? I mean, any takers, you can just put up your hand and comment. What is the reality like in South Africa if we want to sum it up in a word? You can say Ubuntu. You can say there's a hunger for learning. You can say that we've got a youth complement. You can say that economic activity is suppressed. You can put leadership on. So on the tool that we distributed, if you flip it over, you'll see 4 different lenses, and I'll go into how these lenses and the tool work. In the middle, you'll find a pyramid, and we're all familiar with the concept of the bottom end of the pyramid. But if you look at this picture carefully, you'll find that that little pit of the triangle is really the top 457 billionaires globally. That's what they represent. Out of a population of most probably 7.5 to 8 billion people, they represent so much of the consumer market. That's the picture we're looking at. The next layer there is the top 20. This is 20 million. These are the millionaires that are consumers. That's the next layer. The third one there is talking about 1.2 billion middle class, and that I would guess represents the majority of us here today. And then you'll find the bottom end of the pyramid represents 4 billion consumers globally. Now again, we know many people that are part of that bracket if we are not in that bracket ourselves. So what this is just saying, if we're talking about a South African reality, and if we're talking about an African reality, and if we look at the global reality, I think that there's a lot of similarities, but yes, there's also specific and unique differences. So if we're talking about co-creating reality, and if we're saying let's contribute to developing a sustainable society, we have a lot of opportunity, but we've got a lot of work to do. Is the minute there's economic activity, the minute you get people actively involved in stimulating the economy, a lot of things change. People would want to acquire new skills, they would want to learn things, they would like to have access to toolkits, they would want to start collaborating. So the minute your Maslow in terms of food security, safety is addressed, obviously actualization will follow. So again, big lead in to the work that we're doing together today. So the theme of our collaboration is on sustainable business performance, and this is saying, how do we establish or how do we make sure that the businesses that are in our country today are actually sustainable in the African context? So essentially, a sustainable business is a business that's not just doing financially, doing well financially. It's a business that also makes a contribution to more stakeholders, and it's a business that also considers the impact on the environment. So generally known as the triple bottom line way of looking at a business and saying, is this business really sustainable? So there is a new model that's been announced by the global reporting structures around governance and compliance, the GRI, which is called the 6 Capitals model. Now this gives more resolution to what is actually happening inside a business. So you've got your financial elements in the organization, but you've also got your capability of where you're producing something or where your skills are sitting. You're also having the strong component of your human capital, your workforce, your people that you work with and the skills that are sitting there. You've got an element around intellectual property. You've got an element around the environment that needs to be considered, and also the community with CSI. So if you combine all of these elements together, you can really start talking about your overall performance as a business or as a value chain. So now I want to step outside of just being one business. So let's say I'm a business, Exaro Resources, or I'm a business, Da Vinci. I now need to contextualize my business in terms of a value chain. So if I find myself in a mining value chain, and it's a coal mining value chain, then certainly there's a lot of different ways of looking at the value chain that I'm playing in. You know, it's different for coal as it's different for iron ore. If I'm in a value chain of providing skills and learning, you know, I've got a different role to play. So again, I'm going to ask you all to consider in your role, where are you in such a value chain? And then as you're considering where you are in the chain and your business is in this chain, reflect on your customers, reflect on your suppliers, reflect on, are you collaborating with customers, suppliers, partners, colleagues in that value chain, you know, for optimal benefit? And also reflect on, is your value chain addressing a demand or a need? So in the context of the bottom end of the pyramid, if we're saying we're only servicing 29% of the global population, we are certainly not hitting to where the demand is. So we might have products and solutions that are just not available, and it could be that it's too costly, or it could be that logistics is a problem, but there's a huge opportunity for us if we can start redesigning our value chains to be much more resilient and much more sustainable to be able to meet these demands. So reflect a little bit on your value chains, and then I'd like to open it up for discussion. So again, there is a difference between a value chain and a supply chain, and again, there's very strict definitions behind it. But essentially, the value chain delivers value to a customer, and the supply chain supplies something. And it's really finding this balance of what the demand is and what the production is, or what the push is versus what the pull is that needs to add value. So just thoughts on resilient value chains, or where you guys are in the context of a value chain and how things are going in the value chains that you're finding yourselves. So any takers on that, let's say, value chain discussion? Are the value chains that we're in performing? And if they are performing, why are they performing? Are we collaborating? Do we have clear line of sight to the demand? Are we constantly adjusting to it? So if mobile learning is in demand, you're part of that value chain. You're a technology provider, but also you're designing this framework of making sure that you can meet the demand with your partners and your suppliers. That's your value chain. And certainly the end consumer are users of mobile technology. Yeah. So more thoughts? Should I? Yeah, there's a thought.
In the value chain, for example, transport is very important, but transport adds. Say, for example, the ticket price to go and see a production could be 50 rand, but now if you add transport, it almost makes the offering unaffordable.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's limiting the value that you can offer, and it's also limiting the amount of times that you can do this effectively. That's a very practical example. And again, if we're saying, considering your business, I think your business is playing a very strategic role certainly in the economy and stimulating people's thinking. So we need more of that. But how do we enable you to do more? The only way to enable you is to actually bring a partner to the table. So it could be a partner from a corporate perspective that would like to do corporate social investment projects, or would like to do development of skills in the country. And then suddenly your constraint in the value chain of transportation and the cost there could be removed, or it could be subsidized. So it's a very practical example of a value chain. More thoughts? Value chain thinking. So where are you in the value chain? How is your business doing in that value chain? Are you standing alone, or are you finding that people are supporting you? Do you have access to the right technology?
He's in medicine, and that is in private medicine. And that is a value chain at this stage that is under stress because of people having to pay a very high premium to their medical aid, and that what the medical aid reimburses the specialist is a very small portion. So you end up with a very big cycle of unhappy patients. Because they don't want to be there in the first place. Sure. They pay 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 rand, and the medical aid feels that that particular specialist's time is worth 420 rand. And you can't do the work for that.
Yes.
So I don't know, that value chain is seriously at risk of, I don't know, implosion or explosion, or, at this stage we think it might be simply not working at all.
It's a very good example, and it's a practical one. Yes,
as
sure.
a practical example.
Yep.
He's now experimenting making whiskey on the stoop.
Absolutely. Yep.
Just out of frustration.
Sure.
Okay. So that's the one value chain, and my own personal value chain is I'm in private education. That again is we all have our challenges. We cater for that top end of the pyramid that is very demanding and becoming smaller, and I don't always think that the system, if you look at SAQA and how you've got to structure your courses, and how costly they become, that we also, I don't know how long we will be able to carry on the way that we are doing it. So lots of questions.
Thanks for those two examples, and I think they're great. I want to get more inputs, but just responding to them very briefly. The ecosystem that are supporting, let's say, the pharmaceutical industry and the medical industry is certainly under pressure. The system is under pressure, therefore the value chain is under pressure. And it's the same with the higher education system and certainly the training system in our country. So I think contextualizing our reality as a system of what are we experiencing in South Africa, and then understanding that, we don't operate in isolation. We operate in a value chain which operates in a bigger ecosystem. So the only way to really address a value chain to be resilient is firstly understanding whether that value chain is adding value, and yes, certainly the value chains are adding value. Then understanding what the demand is. So the demand today, the demand medium term and longer term, and then repositioning the value chain, the value that you're bringing as a chain to that demand, even if you need to subsidize it to get the financial model to work. Because again, if the value is there, you might find that subsidizing a value chain is possible, or reconfiguring the value chain by activating technology or by activating value-added services as part of that value chain might make it feasible again. But the essence of what you're describing to me is value chains that's functioned in a very structured way for a long time and hasn't changed. And again, with the speed of technology, things need to be disrupted constantly, and sometimes we're our own worst enemy by not disrupting before we're getting disrupted. And I think that's what you're describing. More thoughts there?
If you look at the way we define sustainability of businesses, we basically the sustainability issues look at external factors like ecosystem, culture, those type of things. Interesting enough, those could be the building blocks of sustainability.
Sure.
But to me, without looking internally, actually suppresses innovation.
Absolutely.
Because now you externalizing the problem rather than saying, okay, this is the value chain, as you put it. We're looking at the ecosystem, we're looking at the culture, the politics, the affecting everything else. But how do I look at this from a systemic point of view? Rather than from a systems point of view.
Yes.
And if we start looking at it from a systemic point of view, we might find that the internal factors as well influence innovation. And once that happens, we start finding new ways and new methods of disrupting the entire ecosystem, as it were.
Yes.
And new things start to emerge. And the problem of saying, I'm not sure how we're going to carry on going forward, start to fall away, because now you start seeing a wider picture of saying, okay, this is how it was working, and this is the new channel of taking this energy forward.
Yes, thanks for those comments. I'm in full agreement with you, and it's a very nice lead-in to the rest of our session. I just want to comment at a global level. When you consider Copenhagen, the structure where the focus has been around carbon emissions reduction and climate change, that discussion has matured now towards global collaboration around sustainable development, which is really sustainable business performance, which to your point needs to address both the external and internal factors. Both are equally important. The point you're making around internalizing is just as important. Traditionally, companies internalizes all the financial aspects around projects or businesses, saying, what is the return on my investment? What is my IRR over the next 5 to 7 years? And then externalizing all the CSI and environmental aspects. And luckily, the time for that has changed, which means that the way that we're designing businesses or designing projects today are very different. But for existing businesses, including our own business, as Da Vinci and Blank Canvas, we need to constantly actually review ourselves, saying, is our design fit for purpose, or do we need to change the value chain that we're in to be aligned to where things are moving globally? So an example of where things are moving globally is the circular economy. So if you don't design a value chain today to be cradle to cradle instead of cradle to grave, in other words, recycling is part of it. Environmental benefit is part of it, not degrading the environment. If your design of your value chain does not create new skills, create jobs, create entrepreneurship, and really make an economic contribution to the community where you're operating as a business, both internally and externally, you actually don't have the right of existence and you will not be sustainable. So I share your thinking there, and thanks for your contribution. Sustainability globally, you would know, as experts in the field, is something that we haven't cracked yet. We haven't got our mind around it yet, and I don't think it's something that we will most probably achieve in our lifetime. We are laying the foundations for the next generation to have hopefully a better future than what we inherited. I think sustainability is something that needs to be planned as a vision, but at the same time, for many of the sustainability aspects, you will not have known solutions, and that's where you need innovation, and that's where you need redesign, that's where you need new technology to actually come up with those step change and disruptive solutions to close the gap and to become much more sustainable and more resilient. More thoughts?
I don't know, this thing called sustainability is a very funny issue though. But let me not talk too much on it. When you talk about sustainability, are you talking about the ability of the business to actually thrive?
Yes.
In perpetuity?
Absolutely.
Perpetuity.
So if the business is growing, then it's sustainable.
Yeah. So now the point is this. The ability of a business, say the corporation, to thrive in perpetuity is different from that it is providing a particular product in perpetuity.
Sure.
Do you get a point?
Yeah.
So the product the business is providing cannot be in perpetuity. Because you see, the way we communicate now is not the way we communicated 100 years ago, 50 years ago. There are some companies that actually existed for about 50 years. So if they have been there for the past 50 years, if you go and see the product they were given 50 years ago, it's not the product they are giving right now.
They've evolved, eh?
They've
evolved, innovated.
That evolution, they are evolving to changing circumstances of time.
Yes.
Perhaps they are not the people determining the changing circumstances of time. Perhaps it is the general society, or perhaps that there is something somewhere in the spirits. Something some scientists have called the M theory, the mystic theory, that is actually determining trend, cycles, whatever. I don't know. So the point I'm actually trying to make, sometimes when they talk about the sustainable development, I think nobody, just like you said, nobody has been able to articulate exactly what that thing means. Though biologists will be telling you about protecting the environment, which I think is very faulty. It is not the best way we can save mankind, in actual fact.
Yeah.
Because somebody did a thesis sometime in 1934 in University of Texas, where he demonstrated that atmospheric radiation actually weakens the human DNA at a rate that is faster than the evolution can repair human DNA.
Very interesting.
Yeah, so you could see that the only thing we have to repair human DNA or to save humanity is the evolutionary trend in our DNA.
Yes.
But atmospheric radiation is actually destroying human DNA, weakening human DNA, at a faster rate than the evolution
Very
can do
interesting.
that. So at that point in time,
thanks for those contributions.
Yeah,
I want to respond to it for a minute, and then I'll take another thought.
Yeah.
I want to get into Da Vinci's managerial leadership framework, and this is the framework that's on the other side of the page of the triangle, if you flip your page around. Because what we're leading to is answering this question of what is sustainable business performance? What is a business that is performing in a sustainable way? What drives it? And I think you've highlighted much of that. Obviously, there's external factors in systems and ecosystems that are influencing how we're driving. But if you look at this model very carefully from Da Vinci, you'll see that in the middle, you've got an organizational system. Now, you can say that that's the organization that you work with or that you associated with, or you can say that that's the system. So it could be the higher education system, or it could be the pharmaceutical and the medical value chain or system that you're part of. So that sits in the middle. Then you'll find that it's all about people. So if people are not learning and constantly evolving, you had a very practical example around people that needed to evolve. It's the same in a business. But again, people, you'll see the P there, human interface for human capital. People need skills, people needs capacity, people needs focus and alignment to be able to really be effective. But also, you'll see that people need innovation. There's an I there. And this is all around coming up with new ideas, new thinking, designing new technologies and solutions, and then actually bringing it into the business. So again, you need an element around technology, which is a T, but also around tools or just a certain kind of thinking. So if you don't have creativity in your business, you most probably are not going to be renewing. You are not going to see that your customers have got a certain demand. So these skills in the model is really something that is internalized in your organization to be a sustainable business. So the purpose of this model is all around the management of innovation in your organization for growth, differentiation, and sustainable development. And we can take every one of those elements and break it down. What does growth mean? So growth means you can go into a new market, or you can take a new product to market, or you can take an existing product to a market that's unserviced, like the 71% of the global population we're referring to, or you can refer to sustainable development, which we are unpacking. And again, there are different frameworks to unpack it. But the most simplistic frame is really the triple bottom line model that talks about financial performance, environmental, and social performance all combined. And if you are in a net positive for all three of those, you are making a contribution as a performing company or as a performing value chain. So I've taken your point, I've led into a model, and I want to unpack this model with your insights around the table. There are two more thoughts, and then we're going to go back onto the tool area where you can then use these different lenses of the management of innovation of Da Vinci and actually apply it on your value chain looking for solutions. Your thoughts?
Thank you. I can almost hear you saying sustainability, describing this as the process where the processes that affect the systems as well as processes of a business, affecting how these processes thrive over a sustained period of time. It'll be interesting to find out how, as a nation of thinkers perhaps, we could come up with metrics that do not measure businesses based on space and time. This is what I mean. Usually we celebrate when a business is 5 years old and 10 years old, and we say it's sustainable because it has gone through so much time.
Sure.
It will be interesting to come up with metrics that could then measure how these businesses have affected the environment, including the bottom line, over that space and time.
Absolutely.
Which you don't seem to have at the moment.
Yes, yep. There's a lot of work that is done around it. There are models which refers to inclusive value, which is really based on the 6 capitals model that looks at the organization not just in terms of the duration of the fact that that business has been there for 30 or 40 years and the financial performance, but it looks at the environmental aspects and it also looks at the social aspects. Where that model is falling short at the moment, it is a reporting model, so it's a compliance model saying you need to declare what you're doing, but it doesn't really assist leaders to, at the time of decision making, have the right information to say, we are not going to open up this new project in a wetland area because that will be environmentally unresponsible, although we can get the environmental license. We are not going to be relocating this community to unlock economic activity. There's a different solution. So at the time of decision making, at the time of design, that's where those aspects needs to be internalized. And that's really the purpose of the discussion around sustainable business performance, is to really internalize all of that. But at the time of decision making and then making it practically possible for leaders to do it. So I can share a number of models with you which internalizes that, and I'd love to apply it with you wherever you are in whichever value chain as a colleague. Okay, there's two more thoughts here, and then we're going to move on to the model.
Just a comment on what Muzi said, which I think is relevant, and that is that businesses operate within a system, and therefore they're part of that system, and part of their report should be back on how they impact that system and how that system can therefore be affected positively or negatively by their participation, and how their innovation could in fact shift that system.
Absolutely. So again, I think many times, positive or negative, that information is known but not shared.
Yeah.
And I think social media has got a big role to play. And we as a society also need to say, you know, is it responsible in the way that those businesses are behaving as leaders, or should we be challenging that, whether it's private sector or government?
So systems impact.
Systems impact, but also organizational impact in that system, to the point you're making. Very good point. Last thought there?
I have entered into what I think is an ambitious program, which I would look at more in terms of a values mesh than a value chain.
Okay.
In the sense that I've developed a composite program. It's titled "How Nations Will Thrive," looking at the very origins of the human problem, right at the DNA and the cellular level. How to integrate that with the macro level, the economy, the politics. And I think the challenge, which was found by Scott Peck years ago in his design of his community development, is that the big challenge is still how to get the sick to want to be healed. In 2015, President Zuma said that South Africa is a sick nation, we need curing. And it is not only South Africa, I think it's all of us. But the challenge that I still find is people wanting to actually go through the painful program of social healing, right? Because it has to start with healing of the individual, right at the DNA level. Because there's a lot of subconscious and inherited fear that causes us a lot of insecurity, but which also affects business. And I think the big challenge now is for the senior players in terms of government to actually want to get healed themselves. Because all of us, from up there right to the person at the bottom, that 4 billion people, all of us need that type of healing.
Absolutely, and we need to bring it about. It's not necessarily going to come from government. I understand your context, but I think we've got it in our hands. We've got the solutions. So how do we apply it for economic benefit, but certainly how do we get the broader benefits as well?
Yeah, okay. We have that program together with a book that will be coming out inside the space of 2 months, also titled How Nations Will Thrive.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I would love to read your book, and it's a fantastic project. I must commend you on it. I'd love to learn more about it.
Yes. If I could conclude maybe to say to Alan, also look at the implications of mobile learning on relations, on human relations, because it is very critical. It affects the motivation to want to use the system.
So just in your findings so far, what is the levels of trust in our country at the moment?
Very low.
So that's really one of the opportunity areas that we can focus on. And that will be part of the healing process, because if we can trust each other as a nation, we can trust each other in the value chain, we can become globally competitive, we can start exporting instead of importing, and we can become a sustainable or self-sustaining nation. So, but thanks for those contributions. I know there's much more there. Okay, just bringing our discussion together. We're still on sustainable business performance, and we're saying, what are the lenses, or what are the things that are driving sustainable business performance, looking internally, but thinking value chain? So from a Da Vinci perspective, if you turn over to the tool with the 4 lenses, so this is where the triangle is in front of you, you will notice that the 4 lenses on the previous model, which is linked from a systems perspective, is depicted in lenses. And again, you'll see somebody there with binoculars. So the minute you look through binoculars, you see things clearer, you see things differently. That's the purpose of lenses of innovation. So essentially, if we have a lens for the management of technology, so which are the technologies that exist that we can leverage for sustainable business performance in our country? So either for yourself, mobile learning, or as a value chain. But also consider clean technology, renewable energy. Let's refer to waste to value technology and water cleaning technology. So also part of the technology lens is toolkits for step change. So if we're saying leadership toolkits, or if we're saying creativity toolkits, which are the things that you guys have got top of mind around technology, the management of technology? It's not just getting technology off the shelf or developing technology. It's actually managing technology for impact, so that you make an impact towards sustainable business performance. That's our first lens. The second one is the management of innovation. So again, managing innovation, we speak a lot about culture and leadership. We speak about systematic processes, and again, sometimes people will say it's either systematic or it's not systematic, it's sort of disruptive. There's a place for both of those. It comes back to capability around innovation and new thinking. So essentially, if you're managing innovation, your essence is to be able to find something that you can implement that is new, so a new solution that can make a sustainable impact. So you can come up with a new product that's relevant to the market today and will be relevant to the market in the future. So it's a new innovation, but you need to take it to market. Then you are really innovating effectively, and you're managing innovation in your business in terms of culture, processes, portfolio. You're actually delivering something with innovation. Fourth lens is all about people. So we spoke about human capital. So people is not just the people in your business, it's the people that are outside your business from a community perspective. It's certainly your suppliers, it's your customers, and also your partners. And if you consider the shifts that are happening around workforce of the future, new skills are needed in your workforce. New skills are needed by youth to be able to be employed. There are new ways of working. So you don't have a workforce that are dedicated at the office from 8 to 5. You've got a global workforce. You work in a collaborative model, which means you can scale and you can deliver on large projects which traditionally only large corporations could do. So just in that lens, the management of people is all about finding the right people, developing the right people, skilling the right people, retaining the right people, rewarding the right people. So what are the things in your mind around people that will create sustainable business performance? And our fourth lens is the management of systems. So this is really saying, how do you look at the bigger picture, this ecosystem that we refer to as South Africa, or the leadership in South Africa, or the education system? Those systems, or even the system in your business, that might sometimes have red tape, but also is a good structure for your business with regards to a strategy and a team implementing it. So when you're looking at systems thinking, what are the systems elements that will create a sustainable business to perform? So I'm going to leave you for 5 minutes. And just, if you can top of mind, just jot down either in one of the lenses or in step 2, where you've got insights, just jot down what are the top 3 things that you think will make a difference towards sustainable business performance in our country. So in your business, in your value chain, in your life. Let's have that discussion in 5 minutes. So you're taking this tool with you. Certainly do some further reflection, but in the 10 minutes that we have together as a team, I'm very interested in your thoughts. We are South Africans. We're saying that we should be trusting each other. We should work together for mutual benefit. We should collaborate. Things should be transparent. We should create new value chains. We should bring new things to market. We should understand the markets that we're operating in. What are your thoughts? And again, you can either mention it per lens, or you can just say, this is the one thing that stood out for you around sustainable business performance. If we have this, if we have trust, then we'll have sustainable business performance in my company or in the country. What are your thoughts? Any takers?
Can I contribute one? I don't know where it fits in, but if I think about the country and then narrowing it down to your own local context, sometimes you avoid having the difficult conversations. For me, that is where there's lack of trust. There's there's sabotage. There's unwillingness to participate or buy in that type of thing. And it is sometimes just a question of what is the difficult conversation that we must have. Are they uncomfortable?
It's a great point, and I think that's the purpose of a forum like this, and it's also a purpose of the sustainability forums, because those forums are neutral, which means that you can have any discussion there. So thanks for that point, duly noted, and I think we should do more of that.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a question about this word, manage.
Yes.
Manage has to actually deal with sifting through things. So you have to make a decision to drop something and to restrain, constrain, and you have to choose.
Yes.
Then there is also this. I'm worried that concept and the mind that drives it would constrain intellectualism. It will constrain creativity. It will constrain innovation. Because most of the time, the people who are making the choice in these management establishments are not necessarily the people who are creating the innovative ideas.
Sure.
So the fact that somebody is somewhere else determining whether somebody's intellectual product is going to thrive, and he's the person who developed that intellectual product, is a problem to creativity and the expansivity of knowledge, and the knowledge they are going to use to advance the world. I'm also not comfortable with the whole idea of competition or competitive advantage. Because if you look at competition, it is contrary to cooperation, collaboration. It is competition that is actually killing the world. If we are not, that would be too much of a word to use. Competition is actually constraining the world. If we are collaborating, if you look at human and animal species and even plant species, if we have to borrow from nature, you could see that the collaborative species thrive much more than the competitive species. The competitive species are eating people and all the stuff. So that is where I see problem. Because, if you look at the last thing the Minister of Finance said the other day, I thought about it. Why do you pay somebody $1.5 million rand in the first place and charge and take 45% out of it? Then don't pay him 1.5 million. No, pay him that 1.5 million minus 45%. Don't pay him 1.5 million in the first place.
Yep.
Do you get the point?
I get the point. You're
so we don't have to get there.
Very big discussions.
Yeah.
And I hear you on management.
Yeah.
And I also hear you on the decision making.
Competition
I hear you on the
cooperation
competition side, and I hear you on collaboration.
Yes.
I just want to say there are there's a number of big shifts happening globally. The one is sharing of intellectual property. And I think it's something to watch. Jaco, I'm sure that you're on top of this as well, where people are actually sharing IP to move faster for the greater good. That's the one. And then there's a big notion around co-competition of saying today we compete, tomorrow we collaborate, because whatever we're working on is a bigger case than, for us in our own capacity. If we work together, we can solve the water or the drought problem in the country. If I work against you, we're not going to make an impact. So there's a very big notion around collaboration, you're right. And I think it needs to be well understood and well framed so that there are rules of engagement from a co-competing perspective. On the management side, I'd like to just talk to you a little bit about that in more detail. Okay, but it's a big discussion. More thoughts?
Just a thought on certainty. So certainty relates to, if you're looking at a system, there must be certainty that that system is what it is. So
yes.
We talk about things like judicial process, corruption.
Yes.
If you're dealing with all those uncertainties, if your system in South Africa, for example, is not controlling those uncertainties, it makes it much more difficult to have a sustainable system.
Absolutely.
And environment. So out of that comes accountability, transparency, and all the rest of it to help certainty.
The ecosystem needs to be more certain, okay, but at the same time, you're part of a global market, lots of uncertainty globally, not just in South Africa. Some certainty will come from the ecosystem, and again, I think we've got relatively good ecosystems and governance systems in our country that allows us to operate as value chains. But more certainty would come from understanding your demand. So if you have a demand contract in place, like an offtake agreement, that's also almost the certainty that you need. Because against that sort of certainty, although it's not necessarily in the ecosystem, you have got something to bargain with. So just a comment on you can get certainty from different places. And I think understanding where the consumer market is going and really connecting and servicing the demand, you will almost get the ecosystem to assist you to be successful against all odds. Okay. More thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. About performance, I look at it in the context of our first course in Da Vinci, self, other, and context, and where we rely on all these three things. Many times, businesses will survive as a consequence of what's happening within the market, the other players, as well as the bureaucracy for which you have to comply to.
Sure. Yep.
Now, in our case, here we have a situation of huge, big companies, okay? Now, of course, for obvious advantages, we supply anything at any price. And, you know, they make a cartel, come together, drop the prices of something, you're out, and when you're out, they will push the price up when you can't participate anymore. And that is our number one problem as far as promoting small enterprises is concerned. The other aspect is on the bureaucracy. To register and operate a company is a huge academic exercise. The compliance, the bylaws and the national laws that you have to comply to take periods of time. If you want to accredit a course, for instance, in the area of training, we all know we have few training providers in the country. We can't cover the skills gap, and yet when you apply to get your course accredited, apart from taking a year, but you're going to pay a lot of consultants, the occupational therapist, who else? The person who develops some material, and have time to develop, maybe they've developed it. Yes, it's too expensive. And now we're talking about business performance. How do you can be very innovative in whatever you do and have the best product, but somebody, either the bureaucracy or the big corporate, will drive you out of business and you'll still be applying for jobs. Now, the situation we also have is that our economy only has a 43% absorption rate. That means annually, our employment sector, whoever they are, can only take 4 out of 10 people who come out of the school system. So sustainability and business performance need to be looked at in the context of the two, bureaucracy as well as the monopolies.
I agree.
Yes. Thanks for those points. They're great points. Just thinking about it, there are shifts happening in terms of policy and entrepreneurial development, and specifically shifts around enterprise and supply development, which means that we almost need to link our ideas and initiatives to a value chain and then work with the participants of that value chain to invest in solution providers and suppliers for the value chain. So there are mechanisms of which I'm very familiar with that I think will enable entrepreneurs to be much more sustainable and also to be able to scale, which should be explored. But I certainly heard you around the barriers of entry of starting a new business, the barriers of competition, the barriers of compliance and governance. It's not easy out there, but again, for an entrepreneur like yourself with the tenacity, you know, those are all opportunities that needs to be certainly unlocked. So I'm more than willing to share that with you and explore it as well. More thoughts?
I was actually thinking about the concept of actually a living wage.
Okay.
You know, when we're talking about actually the pyramid, when you look at actually most of the people in that pyramid actually have jobs.
Yes.
But the problem is that they are not earning enough for them to put them at a certain level. When you look at economics from a perspective of government on one hand has to encourage business development and competition, but at the same time they have to balance social welfare. So I think in our discussions we should consider even how do we address this issue of the living wage, because we can cut cost, we can automate, but at the end of the day, how do we help government to, you know, for its social welfare programs? Because on one hand we want tax cuts, but at the same time there is growing demand for government to raise funds for social programs, and then they go and borrow more. Then it's like a continuous
It's like
circle.
a vicious circle, eh?
Yeah.
So what's the solution that you're thinking about?
Look, you know, and I didn't think of a solution. You know, as people were talking, I'm reminded of a quotation that I read through today. And that quotation said, there will always be demand. So when I saw that pyramid and said, yeah, but there's always demand, the question is that how many people are able or can afford to meet that demand? We seem to be always, even when we're talking about sustainability, actually we're talking about our sustainability, not the sustainability of the economy of the country,
yes.
the sustainability of my business.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So, but I just thought, that's why I said it's more of a contributory thought to say, look, I think when somebody was talking there, and I thought sustainability is about me, not about the community or somebody else.
It's a great contribution that you're making.
I think I hear a lot of concern about the credibility of our leadership. And I'm reminded of the solution. In the 60s, Americans had the same problem when they had the recession. And Kennedy said, let's put a man on the moon. Now, there wasn't loads of gold waiting for us on the moon. But what it did, it put the country in motion. They started working, mining, manufacturing stuff, getting pens that could work against gravity, and so on and so forth. But that machine, I think what happens in our country, certainly it happens to me, I become despondent exactly by some of the concerns that have been raised. So for me, it's about having a credible leader. Kennedy was a leader, and people actually followed him to the moon.
Sure, I think that's a very valid point you're making. So it's about leadership and having a common goal, and then obviously inspiring the nation to actually get in behind that goal.
Greatest problem that's facing almost every nation right now is the well-being of the citizenry.
Sure.
And the citizenry at the top, at the lowest level here. Yeah.
Sure.
Which is skills, jobs, and all the stuff. So you see that there are even a lot of people who have skills, but they don't have job to do. And there are so many things to be done, and there seems to be no money to pay them. Do you get the point?
I get the
So
point.
it is a very big irony to talk about lack of job in South Africa or in any African country, because there are so many things to be done in Africa.
But those are the opportunities. Right?
Yeah, those are opportunities.
Yeah.
And there are quite a lot of people who have been educated in Africa, have skills, and they are willing to do things. But there's this thing called money. This thing they call money. That's one reason why an educated, able-bodied man or woman has skill will not be able to do a work that is waiting for him over there. That is waiting for that side.
Thanks for that contribution.
That's the point. And the second thing I wanted to say is, so many, there's a case in America, but I can't quote it. I read it somewhere, but I lost the whatever. He talked about a situation where they discovered that there are too many unemployed people. And it is no more necessary for government to continue to collect increased tax on the businesses. What they did was that they reduced tax and encouraged people to establish more businesses and employ more people. So that this money government is collecting, which will be actually either stolen by some people or misplaced by other people, can now be left in the hands of people who are thinking, the entrepreneurs and the people out there, who can now think of how to mobilize the money. And they can mobilize it in some form of entrepreneurship or small, medium-scale entrepreneurship and productivity. And people will get, instead of taxing people and increasing the tax and increasing the tax, government is not an employer of labor. Think about it.
Thanks for that contribution. And what I like about it is the disruptive thinking behind it. So it's totally going against what we know today, and it will make the impact as you've described it. So I think we should register it as something to put on the radar of government, but also of the people of the country, because the success of really marrying economic activity with poverty alleviation, getting people economically active and stimulating people towards a common goal. So I want to leave you with this thought. We've got a common goal, and it's not just a South African goal or an African goal. It's a global goal of saying we have to change, value change, we have to change our behavior if we want to be around in the future, if we want to leave a future for our kids. So that goal's been set. Putting the man on the moon has been set. It started with the carbon and the climate change discussion. but it's moved towards a full-blown saying, how do we change from just having a financial focus, a select few driving financial focus, to an inclusive value focus for all, to the 9 billion people picture? How do we change? How do we learn from nature? How do we redefine value chains? How do we bring new technology in? Because we've got the solutions. How do we implement it? And then how do we create the business cases? So in business cases, I just want to say, a business case is not just a compelling financial argument. It's internalizing all the aspects of environmental and social, and then getting managers and leaders to make the right decisions at the right time. So closing up the thought for today, thank you very much for your insights, and I'm really sorry that we only have so much time today, but for me this is not the end of the conversation. I'm certainly available through the Da Vinci structure, so engage with me at any time, online or phone me. I'm very interested in your solutions and your solution thinking around sustainable business performance. And I just want to say I'm encouraged by how many companies are actually moving on this already. And you can put big companies here, Unilever, you can put companies in here like, for example, Parmalat, that's understanding that there's need for a cheese slice in a quota in the rural economy, and they've turned it into R1 billion value proposition for their business, and it's now 30% of their gross profit after tax. So there are huge opportunities if we can match the informal sector with the formal sector, including the entrepreneurship side, and that is what systems thinking allows us to do. So it's really connecting the right dots, and then with your persistence, stay at it until you've got that breakthrough. So that's it from my side. Thanks for your time and for your insights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Geraldo. I knew this was going to be exciting. And I can see that there was so energy in the room, so much energy in the room. Thank you very much. And I agree. I think this is not the final conversation. We're going to have more conversations. And I really want to thank you for setting the scene in terms of what we're going to be doing in the next month and in the next month and the next month. And I invite you to come and attend those.
I'd love to. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Even I learned quite a lot.